We're about to get what is possibly a unique backstage view of how actors prepare for a Shakespearean role. Now, some of this work begins before rehearsals. Some of it goes on throughout an actor's life. I meet and have worked with many actors who approach Shakespeare and other classics thinking, how can I impose what I know, my own experience, upon this language, upon the character? Yet I believe the secret is to get inside the language and allow it to take you into places you yourself have never dreamt you'd reach, places where you've certainly never been before. And yet it takes hard work and practice to master this technique of speaking Shakespeare. Staying open and alive to his rhythms and imagery requires the same kind of flexibility and training that I imagine a skier must need to prepare for the rigors of the slopes. Both he and the actor require similar agility and sensitivity. Now, this workshop will focus on the particular vocabulary which takes us into the different worlds which Shakespeare creates. We'll look at the beginning of Hamlet and the beginning of the Midsummer Night's Dream, two very different worlds set up in the very first scenes. We'll also see how a speech is structured. There's nothing more terrifying for me than to be faced with a 30 or 40-line soliloquy, and it's only when I begin to understand the structure, the questions, the premise, the reasoning, and the conclusion, that the speech begins to open up and becomes less fearsome. We'll also hear how the sounds of the language are an intrinsic part of its meaning.
The first scene in a Shakespeare play always takes us straight to the core of that particular world. That is the genius of the language. For instance, in the first scene of King Lear, the language is totally to do with quantity. How much? How much do you love me? He asks Goneril and Regan. And to their very effusive answers, he says, then you can have this much land. It is as if he has got property and love mixed in his mind, and he has no real judgment left. And this continues until he says to Cordelia, what can you say to draw a third, more opulent than your sisters? Speak. And Cordelia answers, nothing. And that one word, nothing, rings out. It is the antithesis of all that has gone before. And this mixing of property and love informs us that there is something deeply wrong within Lear as a person. And when Cordelia says that word, nothing, it is as if she is trying to shock him into sense. Each play, you'll find, tells us so much, so simply, by the undercurrent of the words, what we call today the subtext. I suppose I would like this work to be called Hearing Shakespeare, because the work is about hearing what is in there. We've got to hear what is that world, really. It takes away your responsibility to do everything. I think that's the important thing, that we hear something in the language which feeds us, so that when we do start acting it in situ on the stage, that will also help us. It will be us, ballast, as it were. It'll earth us, so that we don't have to do everything in the text. We don't have to make everything clear. We've got to know what we mean in our minds. We've got to be specific. But it will reach more than you think if we are like that. Let us look at the beginning of two plays. First, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and then Hamlet. The dream first.
nuptial hour
draws on apace. 4 happy days bring in
another moon. But oh, methinks how slow.
This old moon wanes. She lingers my desires.
Like to a stepdame or a dowager.
long withering out a young
Here,
man's
the
revenue.
group is reading the first 3 speeches of the play between Theseus and Hippolyta. Each actor reading a line round in the circle so they can listen without any pressure to make sense, something which is always a very freeing thing to do. And then we will do some exercises with it.
Turn melancholy forth to funerals.
The pale companion is not for our pomp.
Hippolyta, I wooed thee with my sword.
And won my love, doing thee injuries.
But I will wed thee in another key.
With pomp, with triumph, and with reveling.
Just read that last line again.
With pomp, with triumph, and with reveling.
Right, anything you want to say about that?
Sounds happy.
A lot of snappy words.
It's quite different from what we've been doing.
Yes, though, to me, the beginning of this, like, almost the, I say it, they're taking us into a dream. To me, I feel, it's like the spell is being cast
Very good,
now.
yeah.
Fair, Hippolyta. I feel like I'm being pulled into the dream of it, sort of.
Yes. And really that language, that vocabulary would not take us into any other play. This language takes us into this world. It is the world of the play, and it wouldn't take us anywhere else.
The words that jump out are amazing.
What?
Draws, nuptial,
Yes.
wanes, moon,
Linger.
silver,
Yes.
lingering, heaven, bow.
With that in mind, can I have the 2 who are doing Hippolyta, and can you others not look at your page at all anymore, and just repeat these words, which are to do with sexuality?
Now, fair Hippolyta, our nuptial hour draws apace. 4 happy days bring in another moon. But oh, methinks how slow this old moon wanes. She lingers my desires, like to a stepdam or a dowager, long withering out a young man's revenue.
4 days will quickly steep themselves in night. 4 nights will quickly dream away the time. And then the moon, like to a silver bow, new bent in heaven, shall behold the night of our solemnity.
Go, Phyllis Straight.
Illustrate.
Stir up the Athenian youth, merriment. Awake the pert, inimitable spirit of mirth. Turn melancholy forth to funerals, that the pale companion is not for our pomp. Hippolyta, I wooed thee with my sword, and won thy love, and won thy love, doing thee injuries. But I will wed thee in another key, with pomp, with triumph, and with reveling.
I'll take all of the above.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, when you really listen to that language, and you listen to it so much, and you take it all for granted, and you accept it. I'd like you to go into you go into that corner, and you go into that corner, and right, and I'd like 3 handmaidens to go with Lolita, and 3 gentlemen, gentlemen behind. The first time through, speak as much as what your protagonist is speaking as possible without reading it. You can put everything down. I want them to feel that there is a sort of property in the language, but we'll ask them what they feel afterwards. But then, when I do it again through, when I ask them to get together, I want you to stop them getting together until they get to I wooed thee with the pale companion is not for our pomp, and then just allow them. Okay. All right.
Is this a paranoid exercise?
Speak when you're ready.
Now, fair Hippolyta, our nuptial hour draws apace. 4 happy days bring in another moon. but oh, methinks how slow this old moon wanes. She lingers my desires like to a stepdam or a dowager, long withering out a young man's revenue.
4 days will quickly steep themselves in night. 4 nights will quickly dream away the time. And then the moon, like to a silver bow, new bent in heaven, shall behold the night of our solemnity.
Go, Philostrate. Go, Philostrate. Stir up the Athenian youth to merriment.
What I want you to feel is that there is a property in the language. Does that make any sense? That you open it out and it's public speaking, basically, isn't it? It's bigger, and that's all it's about.
All of the feminine and all of the masculine of the world are
Yes.
coming at each other rather than two people. And if I were playing the part, I'd feel intimidated. How do I embody this much feminine, this much men, you know? But to imagine that behind me would help.
So the exercise isn't entirely stupid.
But also the other sense you got in it was that they were unashamedly in love with each other. Right. That they weren't holding anything back, that it was like, I'm giving all of myself to you, and I'm giving all of myself back to you.
Brilliant.
To me, it was the support of the people behind that lift you, and like it sort of felt like it lifted my words closer to her.
But that's all I wanted you to feel, in fact. Now what I want you to do is to do it one more time, and just try and move towards each other.
Now, fair Hippolyta, our nuptial hour draws apace. 4 happy days bring in another moon. But oh, methinks how slow this old moon wanes. She lingers my desires like to a stepdam or a dowager, long withering out a young man's revenue.
4 days will quickly steep themselves in night.
Now this was fun and perhaps a bit absurd, but is useful to do something like this because it gives the actor permission to find the extravagance of the language without being self-conscious and judgmental. Pulling each other back or putting some sort of resistance there will help us to experience physically what is at stake, the underlying danger in the language. So that when you come back to being serious, to making reason with it, you still keep something of its size and something of the delight in expressing it. We must always know what the language costs.
But I will wed thee in another key, with pomp, with triumph, and with reveling.
Not a chance.
Yeah, does that feel good? Now without that, keep separate, but without all that. But really, could you feel how those vowels and everything were lengthening out?
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant, okay. Now, for serious, for seriously. Okay, right, go.
Now, fair Hippolyta, our nuptial hour draws apace. 4 happy days bring in another moon. But oh, methinks how slow this old moon wanes. She lingers my desires, like to a stepdam or a dowager, long withering out a young man's revenue.
4 days will quickly steep themselves in night. 4 nights will quickly dream away the time. And then the moon, like a silver bow, new bent in heaven, shall behold the night of our solemnity.
Go, Philostrate. Stir up the Athenian youth to merriment. Awake the nimble and pert spirit of mirth. Turn melancholy forth to funerals. The pale companion is not for our pomp. Hippolyta, I wooed thee with my sword, and won thy love by doing thee injuries, but I will wed thee with another key, with pomp, with triumph, and with reveling.
Great. Really what we've done is try to release the language in a physical way. You heard these vowels being extravagant, and this is that extravagance that we have to keep after, because it is, the words are saying a huge amount. I mean, they are like, keeping the lid on the pot, as it were. And so we need to be able to feel truthful when we do that extravagance. And I think that's what we have to keep working between. Going to one extreme and then coming back to the thought and then really opening it out again like that. This danger erupts in a different way when Aegeus speaks. He is pleading for the right to dispose of his daughter in any way he chooses. The rhythm is cruel. We hear his agitation in the way his thoughts are broken up and his care to give due reverence to the Duke, my noble Duke, etc. His rhythms are very different from Theseus and Hippolyta. What I'd like to do now is just look very specifically at the structure. Can we just speak the words which grab us as he says it? Just the violent words, as it were, that could be violent. Okay, right.
Happy be Theseus, our renowned Duke.
Thanks, good Aegeus. What's the news with thee?
Full of vexation come I, with complaint against my child, my daughter Hermia. Stand forth, Demetrius. Stand forth. My noble lord, this man hath my consent to marry her.
Only the violent words, yes.
Stand forth, Lysander! Stand forth. And my gracious Duke, this man hath bewitched the bosom of my child. Thou, Lysander, thou hast given her rhymes and interchanged love tokens with my child. Thou hast by moonlight at her window sung with feigning voice verses of feigning love, and stoned the expression of her fantasy with bracelets of thy hair, rings, gauds, conceits, knacks, trifles, nosegays, sweetmeats, messengers of strong prevailing in unhardened youth. With cunning hast thou filched my daughter's heart, turned her obedience, which is due to me, to stubborn harshness. And my gracious Duke, be it so, she will not here before your grace consent to marry with Demetrius. I beg the ancient privilege of Athens, as she is mine, I may dispose of her, which shall be either to this gentleman or to her death, according to our law, immediately provided in this case.
A word like filched. You know, Iago uses that word to Othello, and it's not just stolen, is it?
It's like he just found out and he's got all these rings, gauds, conceits in this, chest of drawers.
And those are the things that have bewitched her. So they're dangerous things, aren't they? One thing I think we do forget in Shakespeare is that when you talk about sin, you really mean sin, which is something quite concrete, which we don't know, which we don't view it today in the same way. Bewitched is something absolutely real and quite frightening,
This
isn't
makes
it?
him very dangerous.
Yes,
This is
what
so
I was
disturbing because it is faintly ridiculous. After what we saw before, but this makes him so dangerous.
Yeah. And we have to take that very seriously because there are people who do believe in being bewitched, you know. So it is something that we can't speak about lightly.
Yeah. You expect Lysander, when he said she'll die if she doesn't, consent, you expect Lysander to say, look, I can't have this. She, save her life, but he doesn't. Yeah. So it's like they've got this thing and nobody is letting go, and it's like that. But he doesn't say, no, okay.
And that is the world we're being taken into, that the cruelty of that world, the societal values of it, which come down from the Duke. That is where all that language takes us into the whole society. We have to be clear about that. I really feel very strongly that we should just do this exercise on the beginning of Hamlet because it's an amazing piece of writing. It's usually done with a lot of soldiers and a lot of military stuff. I want to see if we can get somewhere in it just by listening to it. This exercise is totally about listening and what we hear. So the actors are going to different spots in this room, space, and we're going to first of all whisper it through, hear rather, what that does to the language. How you speak at night in the dark is a different thing, isn't it? That is also a mystery. It's also part of the mystery. Right, so can you go to your marks, as it were? Oh. Yeah, okay.
Nay, answer me. Stand and unfold yourself. Bernardo, you come most carefully upon your hour.
It is now struck 12. Get me to bed, Francisco.
For this relief, much thanks. 'Tis bitter cold, and I am sick at heart.
Have you had quiet guard?
Not a mouse stirring.
Well, good night. If you do meet Horatio and Marcellus, the rivals of my watch, bid them make haste.
I think I hear them. Stand ho! Who is there?
Friends to this ground, and liegemen to the Dane.
Give you good night.
Oh, farewell, honest soldier. Who hath relieved you?
Bernardo hath my place. Give you good night.
Hola, Bernardo. Say, what is Horatio there?
A piece of him.
Welcome, Horatio. Welcome, good Marcellus.
What? Has this thing appeared again tonight?
I have seen nothing. Horatio says 'tis but our fantasy, and will not let belief take hold of him, touching this dreaded sight, twice seen of us. Therefore I have entreated him along with us to watch the minutes of this night, that if, again, this apparition come, he may approve our eyes and speak to it.
Tush, tush! 'Twill not appear.
Sit down a while, and let us once again assail your ears that are so fortified against our story, what we 2 nights have seen.
Well, sit we down, and let us hear Bernardo speak of this.
Last night of all, when yon same star that's westward from the pole had made his course to illume that part of heaven where now it burns, Marcellus and myself, the bell then striking 1.
Peace!
Look where it comes again. In the same figure like the king that's dead. Thou art a scholar. Speak to it, Horatio. Look. Looks are not like the king. Mark, Horatio.
Most like. It harrows me with fear and wonder.
It would be spoke to.
Speak to it, Horatio. What art thou that usurps this time of night, together with that fair and warlike form in which the majesty of Berry, Denmark, did sometimes march? By heaven, I charge thee, speak.
It is offended. See, it stalks away.
Stay. Speak. Speak. I charge thee, speak. 'Tis gone and will not answer.
Right. It is very dangerous, isn't it?
Everybody's trying to establish something, so nobody's sure of anything.
Well, that is the important thing, isn't it? Because they're not sure where they stand.
It's a play about power, too, so...
Yeah. It's about insecurity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is really what it is. It's almost like it's prose, but it isn't. So there are a lot of spaces in between because you've only got who's there. And then there's a space. Nay, answer me, stand and unfold yourself. That's a whole line.
And a single
Long live the king. Bernardo. He. You come most carefully, and then it's back into that. And then, have you had quiet guard? Not a mouse. You know, there is that sense of suspense all the way through it. But practically from the actor's point of view, when you whisper what happens, you're taking your perception of yourself away. Now, I think that we all have a secret voice somewhere inside us, which we lost when we started to go to school because we had to present ourselves in some way. But when you take that logic, your perception of yourself away, which is making sense of everything and making sure that everybody understands, you hear something in the words which is different. Does that make any sense? You hear what the words are doing. You start lifting the words through. And it has the most extraordinary effect on what the words can do, that they do more than you think they can do.
And it's a strange thing to do, because your normal thing that you would think would be the thing that you would want to do is actually, if you're trying to reach somebody on the other side of the room, is to raise your voice so they can hear you.
Yeah.
But actually to take your voice away and whisper to someone on the other side of the room seems slightly incongruous. It's like, well, if he can hear you, everybody can.
Right.
So why whisper?
You focus what you're saying directly at that person, so you're almost trying to get it past all these other people.
I had an image in the middle of it that we were almost on top tower. So these are our watches, and we can't leave them.
Yeah.
But yet we have to talk about
There's
them.
not a law. There's a law that you have to whisper because you can't make noise if you're on the watch or something. You'll lose your head.
Yeah.
But that his watch happens to be that far away, and we do have to discuss this.
Right.
And the people are here, and also the ghost. I mean, we don't want to.
What
so
ghost?
It makes it seem like there is somebody else there that you don't want to hear what you're talking about.
Someone's always listening in this world.
Yes.
Someone's always behind a door.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. That is brilliant.
And it sets it up right here.
That's great. The ghost in every play.
There is a ghost, yes.
It's really, yeah, right. And when Horatio finally does come in and see Hamlet, it makes it all the more kind of exciting that this is obviously an obvious conspiracy. And all this pomp, and suddenly one of the conspirators comes in and takes the prince and says,
it's very closed.
It's such a
dangerous thing to know.
intimate
Situation.
Because says you come most carefully upon your hour. Carefully.
In good time, I mean, promptly, I suppose.
Yes, promptly.
But maybe that's why Francisco's there, is that so that there's someone who leaves, so then once he's gone, we go and come together. That there's sort of a hello, okay, he's gone. What has this thing appeared again?
In the fear, there's a very good humour in the fear of when the ghost arrives going, you've read a book, speak to me.
It's a relief when the ghost comes. And when he went, oh no, come back. This terrible, because the tension is incredible up till then. I mean, the relief that, I don't know what that relief is about.
The important thing is that we hear what is happening in that language. I mean, that wonderful thing about, have you had quiet guard and it takes a moment, not a mouse stirring. I mean, it has its own music. It has its own sort of pace, its own spaces round it, which actually give it the suspense. Obviously, it isn't whispered. I'm only whispering to give us a feeling of that. But it is in those spaces between the language that the suspense is. And just the directness of it. You don't have to put anything on it. It can be quite plain, but it's there in the space, in the spaces between the language. There's a scream there, the scream between the words. When we take our voice away and simply whisper, we hear everything differently. We hear the references to this thing, the other. We hear our secret response to what is happening in the language. I know I keep talking about this, but it is of the essence. How the vowels can stretch or be very short, the sharpness of or the fullness of the consonants, voiced or unvoiced. We hear the rhythms and suspensions in the line, like this, not a mouse stirring. By heaven I charge thee, speak. 'Tis gone and will not answer. This thing, a piece of him, harrows me with fear and wonder. But so often we drown these textures by overlaying them with meaning, by that voice which we rely on to make sense. And when we do this, we lose a certain mystery, the mystery in the language. In the next two pieces, we're going to focus on how the imagery, that is to say, the pictures we use to describe our feelings, tell us so much about the character. We will find exercises to do to draw this out. First, let us look at Brutus in Julius Caesar. He, along with the other conspirators, is contemplating the killing of Caesar, and we see him here thinking it out on his own. Should action be taken or not? It is a moral question. It is wonderful to hear what I call the ladders of thought by which he argues out his problem, his dilemma. How he has to justify himself that he is doing right. He has to climb the ladder of his images, of his thought, to come to a decision. Now, in everyday life, we all use images. By this I mean pictures to describe our feelings. In Shakespeare, the choice of image tells us so much about the character and the character's state of mind. It is where the character is living. Let's listen and find out what we hear. What interests me very much is how our inner landscape informs our outer one, informs what we do. And I think this is a very good illustration of what that is doing. Can we just listen to it and just very gently, without reading maybe, mutter images that strike you, that grab you? Try to do it through listening and not through reading it.
It must be by his death. And for my part, I know no personal cause to spurn at him, but for the general. He would be crowned. How that might change his nature, there's the question. It is the bright day that brings forth the adder, and that craves weary walking. Crown him that, and then I grant we put a sting in him that at his will he may do danger with. The abuse of greatness is when it disjoins remorse from power. And to speak truth of Caesar, I have not known when his affections swayed more than his reason. But 'tis a common proof that lowliness is young ambition's ladder, whereto the climber upward turns his face. But when he once attains the utmost round, he then unto the ladder turns his back, looks in the clouds, scorning the base degrees by which he did ascend. So Caesar may, then lest he may prevent. And since the quarrel will bear no colour for the thing he is, fashion it thus, that what he is, augmented, would run to these and these extremities. And therefore think him as a serpent's egg, which, hatched, would, as his kind, grow mischievous and kill him in the shell. It's quite difficult to follow the dialogue.
Yes, it is.
Both the internal dialogue and the external dialogue is quite difficult to find. Over the days I've been panicking over it.
Great.
It really does seem to be a case where he's persuading himself. He hasn't made up his mind.
Yes, it's still this question about when you do make up your mind, the moment you do. Have you made up your mind before you start speaking, and then you argue it through, firm it up, and all those things?
It's like if it were done, if it were done when 'tis done.
Yes.
It's that kind of complexity.
It's like his imagination takes him to
Yes. This is really, it's where imagination takes us, isn't it? Sorry, carry on with that.
There's a lot of snake images.
Yes.
Once you've called somebody a snake, then your logical conclusion is that they're going to kill you.
Yes.
It's
where those images take us, isn't it? And just as I believe there is no such thing as a disinterested action, perhaps there's no such thing as a disinterested image.
And you also get the feeling that when he's spurn at him, that he means it. And therefore, to a certain extent, for the rest of the speech, he's trying to find a justifiable reason to dislike this guy.
He's making up things about it.
Yeah, he's trying to...
Totally making up things, because he says he's never known him not to use reason, but once he gets power, he'll start using emotion and not reason. And that's something that he's, just kind of formulating, because there's no proof of that.
It's the whole thing of what if. What if when this happens to him, he's like that? And what if when this happens to him, he's like that? And so, just in case, kill him now.
Yeah, let's kill him now.
It's like Herod killing all firstborns. It's like that.
In a way, it's almost as though the decision subconsciously has been very firmly made, and the rest is to bring it to the conscious level and justify.
Yes, and I think this is the question we always have to ask. And I'm not saying there's any answer, because the actor must choose, must take that choice, him or herself.
There's also a thing you said yesterday about the first line laying down the premise of the dialogue.
Yes.
And that his first thing is, it must be by his death.
Yes.
This
And it
must
could be a
what is
question almost, couldn't it?
Yeah.
That's the important.
He tries to argue it in a logical way, but actually his logic is fueled by emotion.
Yeah.
Because the images are so powerful that the images affect him and his thinking.
To me, it begs the question how much of it is a dialogue between him and himself, and if he's on stage and using the audience exists, so is it to almost assign a meaning or a personality to them and get their permission for something you've already decided, or is it something you're working out by yourself?
Because it very much depends on the convention that is put up during the play.
Right.
This speech is about Brutus himself. It's like Brutus looking in the mirror and seeing himself. It's like when artists say all self-portraits are really about the art. So all portraits, not self-portraits, but all portraits are about themselves.
That's very good.
You know, they might paint the Mona Lisa, but it's really about him. It's not about the Mona Lisa. You know, and it's almost like saying we would maybe get the underscore of that speech is about him. Because Brutus is an honourable man. He is a noble man. His vanity comes through when he says, because Julius Caesar was from low status. It's all about him. It's his vanity.
Just question him gently as he goes. Just heckle him a little bit.
It must be by his death. And for my part, I know no personal cause to spurn at him, but for the general. He would be crowned. How that might change his nature, there's the question. It is the bright day that brings forth the adder, and that craves weary walking. Crown him thou.
I have asked them to heckle him in order to disturb the rhythm of his thoughts, disturb their logic and make them more surprising, for him to be surprised by them. It will make him have to be more precise with the words he chooses to define his feelings that much more clearly. And this will then feed the action and the physicality of the language and open up the questions. The questions about how do we make up our minds? Who do we talk to when we talk to ourselves?
The base degrees by which he did ascend, so Caesar may. Then, lest he may prevent. And since the quarrel will bear no colour for the thing he is, fashion it thus, that what he is augmented would run to these and these extremities, and therefore think him as the serpent's egg, which hatched would, as his kind, grow mischievous, and kill him in the shell.
What did you feel about that?
I feel like to imagine it while you're acting would be brilliant.
Yeah. How did that feel to you?
That was very helpful. In order to actually bring out the internal conversation that he's having with himself.
Conversation is the right word.
The
Not
sense
dialogue.
of
Conversation is right. Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah, because he's showing, he's continually giving images. Well, it's in certain places images of goodness, and deliberately balancing them with badness. When he says that it's the bright day, it's a bright day, but bright days bring out the adder, and therefore walk carefully. It's a constant. Juxtapositions of all of the images that he's choosing to pick out.
There is a resistance in your mind to this. That's the thing, isn't it?
I mean, it's almost like he's having the mirror image is very good, that he's having a fight with himself.
Yes.
Well, it's the obstacles. I mean, basically, that's what, I mean, speaking methodese, these obstacles are created that you can imagine, like, we were saying, it would be wonderful then to have this exercise to help you when you're standing there on stage by yourself.
And it also
to spur you on.
Then can't help but move from being in any way reflective to jumping to being ultimately active.
Yeah, exactly.
And which is, I mean, I loved listening to you do it on the floor. Actually, I think somewhere in the middle is probably the best. This is almost too. It's like I like you thinking it through, but it's such obviously an active speech.
Yeah, but it's also I can't remember what the exercise it was we did earlier. But the fear of actually speaking the words, actually to have these thoughts. It was the Macbeth thing, if it were done when 'tis done. Actually to contemplate assassination in itself is treasonous. The sense of even thinking these things are as dangerous as doing them.
But it's actually your first statement is you've jumped into the breach by saying it must be by his death. The rest of the speech is you kind of justifying that statement.
It's a bungee jump, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to take it.
By the end, he convinces himself that he's saying something brilliant.
Yeah.
Starts off doubting it. Actually, no, that's a really good image, and that it's brilliant. And yes, and, you know, it's like
It's wonderful how he introduces, when he introduces the image of the ladder, and he follows it completely through. It goes on for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines almost. And it goes all the way through. I mean, it's kind of like a ladder, kind of like the way he creates the image, and like that last argument kind of rolls and rolls and rolls, and it kind of builds and builds, and then it kind of comes to such a conclusion at the end. Kill him in his shell.
He gives himself a hook, where you imagine that when he actually goes to kill Caesar, what he's thinking is he's a serpent's egg, and that's the final hook that he's given himself after all the talking.
That is where he is, isn't it? That's where his psyche is.
He's not a man, he's a serpent's egg. He's not a man, he's a serpent's egg, and I can kill a serpent.
It's quite frightening, really, that rhetoric can be used for self-deception and that.
The last line is a half line. It feels to me like I've got it now, so get it.
Kill him,
Don't think one more thought or I'll lose it.
Nothing else, that's it. He's a serpent's egg, and we're going to kill him. Just dead. That's it.
Now, nobody say anything.
Yeah, nobody say anything.
Don't you think it works on us as well? It makes us think about our own ambition, what we are like.
Oh, yes.
So it's very democratic in a way, isn't it? Because it makes us think, well, yes, could we be like that? But we're not in a position that Caesar's in.
Well, I think he's always questioning us. I mean, hopefully,
because he speaks to the senators,
question, doesn't it?
And it's about, you know, what are you in this for? For fame or for?
But he'd also question, you know, how people like Hitler got to power, doesn't it? You know, and all those horrendous
questions our own
things.
consciences. And that's what's really powerful about it.
When do you say no? It's saying, isn't it? When do any of us say no?
He should be
when do actors say no? You know. I mean, all these exercises, I keep repeating, but it's important that they're just ways in to finding, first of all, the ambiguity and all, because that's what's so wonderful about Shakespeare. It's speaking to so many sides of us all the time. So many rooms inside us. Now to a speech from Romeo and Juliet. Juliet's soliloquy when she is told that Romeo has slain Tybalt. She is being torn between her love for Romeo, her husband, and her love for Tybalt, her cousin, whom she also loves as part of her family, which is very close.
Now, for me, sitting here doing this, I have to say this out loud because this is a working thing. Yeah. Because this is such an emotional speech, and I can't just go flying into this.
No.
You just want me to read this?
I just want you to read it without even worrying about it.
Just say.
Yeah.
Good. Oh, serpent heart, hid with a flowering face, did ever dragon keep so fair a cave? Beautiful tyrant, fiend angelical, dove-feathered raven, wolvish ravening lamb, despised substance of divinest show, just opposite to what thou justly seemst, a damned saint, an honorable villain. O nature, what hadst thou to do in hell when thou didst bower the spirit of a fiend in mortal paradise of such sweet flesh? Was ever book containing such vile matter so fairly bound? Oh, that deceit should dwell in such a gorgeous palace.
It's antithesis, really, we're talking about, and so nearly, I mean, all Shakespeare is built on that antithesis. And what is interesting about these opposites, that it presents us with a whole spectrum of experience immediately, just in that. Just do it one more time, and you repeat the antitheses as you go.
Oh, serpent heart, hid with a flowering face, did ever dragon keep so fair a cave? Beautiful tyrant, fiend, angelic.
This speech is full of antithesis, ideas which are opposite, images which are opposite. And this tells us something of the extremity of her feelings. Let's listen.
A damned saint, an honorable villain. Oh, nature, What hadst thou to do in hell when thou didst bower the spirit of a fiend in mortal paradise of such sweet flesh? Was ever book containing such vile matter so fairly bound? Oh, that deceit should dwell in such a gorgeous palace.
There is in the kind of the emotion of it a real kind of sense of a kind of
yes.
It's very kind of open. It's like a wound.
Yes.
It's
like split open.
Yeah,
yes.
it's a real. It's
yes.
like the whole thing is done on a kind of a whale.
And you don't know what to think. You're not left with anything to hang on to except a feeling.
It's almost like when something shocks you and the illusion, someone that seemed this is now this. And for Juliet, to me, it's like the purity of love and the innocence of it now being marred.
Yeah.
And you must deal with that on the moment to say, that's not the way it was, and to struggle with it. This thing with like beautiful tyrant and it's fiend, angelic. It's like I feel he's wonderful. I hate him, but he's that all that.
Yes. And it's a wonderful image of it in such a gorgeous palette. And it reminds one of Galloping Pace when I bought the mansion of a love but not possessed it. Yeah, I want you to try and get out of this circle.
I'll try and get out.
Yeah. Okay, right. Right.
Oh! Serpent heart! Hid with a flowering face. Did ever dragon keep so fair a cave? Beautiful tyrant! Fiend! Angelical! Dove-feathered raven! Wolvish, ravening lamb! Despite substance of defining show! Just opposite what thou justly seemst. A damned saint. An honorable villain! Oh, nature! What hadst thou to do in hell, and thou didst bower the spirit of a fiend? In mortal paradise of such sweet flesh! Whatever book containing such vile matter, so fairly bound. Oh, that deceit should dwell in such a gorgeous palace.
I can't bear it.
It's all right. But it works.
Yes.
I'm just finding words.
Yes, that's exactly what came out, that you had to find the words to get through.
Is it to use the words, or sort of hoping the words will open? If I choose the right words, I will be out of this hell? I mean,
yes, I mean, what it was wonderful about that, it put the whole woman's condition in there,
by
wasn't
closing,
it? That you're closing
and
out.
how can I get out of this and still maintain what I used to? It's like, I know how wonderful he is, and now it's not wonderful, but I can hold on to how wonderful. Can't get out. Can't get out of the thought that this is bad. He killed Tip. You know what I'm saying? And it's like the word, like coming in through the action, made me then feel it on the inside, rather than the outside feeling it.
Yes, and understanding it from the outside.
You feel that way. It just seems impossible that you'll feel any better. That you'll ever get out of that black hole.
It's like when you were scared to start with, and you said, "Tess, this is a really emotional speech."
Yeah.
But Shakespeare is so good that he actually, out of that emotion, he channels the emotion and gives you the images, and the images are what
bring you to it,
and which in a funny way take away the dramatic kind of, I don't know, indulgence of what might happen if you do it, because he's actually giving you. It's like you're trying to stop the scene be dramatic. By you're holding on to these images, and that's all you have to hold on to. That's or else it would just become this huge emotional sort of scream. But they keep bringing you down. They keep sort of saying, "No, I can work this through. I can work this through." And Shakespeare gives you those images that come out of that.
Okay, but my feeling too is like we could have what you just said. You have to have all that going on to keep you anchored. Yes.
Gives you
Rather than
stillness
making it a
and
rhetorical, poetic
Yeah.
reading.
Of course.
Which I think is always...
Exactly, you see, and I'm not, yeah. So can you sit in the middle?
Yes.
And can you just walk around her so you're like threatening for her, but you do it quite quietly there.
Serpent heart, hid with a flowering face. Did ever dragon keep so fair a cave? Beautiful tyrant, fiend angelical, dove-feathered raven, wolvish ravening lamb, despised substance of divinest show, just opposite to what thou justly seemst, a damned saint, an honorable villain. O nature, what hadst thou to do in hell when thou didst bower the spirit of a fiend in mortal paradise of such sweet flesh? Was ever book containing such vile matters so fairly bound? Oh, that deceit should dwell in such a gorgeous palace.
What I really felt on that one was that she was innocent, and that she was beginning to lose that innocence, and that's the terrible struggle.
Yeah.
Because each image she really does have to find.
Yeah.
Because if it just comes to you
You're
straight
right,
away, then
yeah.
you've lost your innocence already.
Exactly.
Whereas
Right,
that's her. You know,
And also you heard the cry in the sense of in the images of the kind of breathing. It was like, you know, when people are really, really upset that or crying, that things come out in like spurts. So it's kind of like you're controlling it, and then you're bringing your breath to the point where you can just say that, and then it's too much, and then you can say that, and then you have to bring it back, and then you can say that, and then you bring it back, and then she finally, after the really almost the longest spurt that she has, at the end of it is,
Yeah, and
it
it
just
really
like
came from
empties
right
it all
down
out.
there, you see.
Thank you.
That's been a wonderful exercise. It has actually fulfilled so many things about how you have to feel wild. I mean, the wildness of this feeling, and yet, if it is contained, you know.
And looking for the images.
Yes,
as Toby said.
exactly. It almost gets wilder because it is contained.
That's so.
It?
I never thought. I never experienced it. Thank
No,
you.
it's really good. Okay. Let's just go over some of these antitheses again. Beautiful tyrant, wolfish ravening lamb, fiend angelical, serpent heart hid with a flowering face, damned saint, honorable villain. She is truly distraught. The extremity of her language says it all. Now let's look at another speech which, like Brutus, shows us a character thinking through a problem and looking at the possibility of action or non-action. Macbeth. Listen for that word, if, and for the short vowels and sharp consonants at the beginning.
If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surcease success, that but this blow might be the be-all and the end-all, here, but here upon this bank and shoal of time, we'll jump the life to come. But in these cases we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions, which, being taught, return to plague the inventor. This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poisoned chalice to our own lips. He's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed, then as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off, and pity, like a naked newborn babe, striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim, horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other.
What I'd just like to do is one exercise with it, all right. What I'd like you to do is go to one side of the room and crouch. But when I say run, move to somewhere else and crouch and do the next bit.
Really?
Is that all right with you?
Well, I'm not good at crouching.
Well, you don't have to crouch.
No, I mean, I could, you just look at that, you mean? Make him
No, no.
Yeah,
You
please,
can do
please.
it.
Exactly what we
Maybe,
need.
don't crouch. Just run to somewhere else. Quite quietly.
If it were done when 'tis done, it were well it were done quick.
Run.
The assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his Circe's success.
Run.
But this blow might be the be-all and the end-all. Here, but here upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come.
Run.
But in these cases, we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions, which being taught return to plague the inventor.
Run.
Even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poisoned chalice to our own lips.
Run.
He's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman, and his subject strong, both against the deed.
Run.
Then as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself.
Run.
Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off.
Run.
Pity, like a naked newborn babe striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind.
Run.
I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other.
Great. Yeah. Okay, so what about that?
Well, it was what you said, which I didn't actually think would happen. Because why should I trust you?
No. No, don't, please.
From across the no.
Absolutely.
No, it's fascinating because you said it's like going to different places in your head, and what's so hard about Shakespeare sometimes is the enormity of what you're contemplating. It's something we don't know how to often fill. Because it's, contemplating killing someone, although we've all felt that at some point, but it's not something, it's not so it does go to different places. It's a different place in your brain, and just like you said, if you move, it's like you're in a different place in your head, which actually started to feel like that.
You do go to different rooms, don't you, in your head? Quite a lot.
Yeah.
When I do film work and I have to do a really emotional scene, it just helps so much to stir the emotion inside of me when I just start, walking around the set or walking in circles or mumbling to myself and just getting my body moving. It gets everything else going as well.
But the important thing is about this is how he argues it through, isn't it? It is a debate going on in his head. And then you notice that thoughts are quite short at the beginning, and then they get longer and longer, and it becomes almost crazy, doesn't it? I mean, the images get so huge that he's almost lost there, and it takes Lady Macbeth to come on and say, bring him back down to sense.
Right.
But that is what I want you to find, the different spaces, the way, the energy that comes from thought to thought, from thought structure to thought structure. Really.
Right. Okay, now the question is then, you know, to do an exercise like that and then to be able to be in one place.
And do it.
And do it.
Yes. I mean...
Do you have a pill?
I don't actually have a pill.
No.
But it's something that if one was working in a production, one would keep on going between, looking for the thought, the emotion, the motive, the character, the situation, and then just giving themselves over to speaking it in some way.
Right.
And gradually the two things hopefully come together, that one informs the other. But you're quite right, you've got to keep questioning it.
Victor, when we're in a lot of trouble, we contain it so well, kind of not letting other people see it. You might be going through absolute hell, but it doesn't look it. You still, don't you? You don't go like that?
Yeah, it's just getting to that place, sort of being able to. Well, it's acting, isn't it? Really?
It's wonderful how quick. I mean, against the thing, all tongues speak of him. I mean, how long that took. If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. Can you feel? It's amazing, isn't it?
It made it seem urgent and important suddenly. He had to get there for the next thought, and that made me think, oh, someone's life is in the balance, rather than if he's contemplating it.
And that wonderful word, if, that he begins with, if it were done when 'tis done.
Another thing that was really interesting to notice is, like, Victor, you were saying that emotional obligation of these huge things that you wrestle with, that these plays are about, particularly something like this, when you physicalize it by running from it, and, you know, if it becomes a really active thing, like the running or the paranoia in the Leontes, it takes the obligation off of you to somehow, we create this emotion through tension, which just makes something more general.
That's the thing we have to learn,
so
isn't it? Yes.
You go, okay, so just, I'm running from this, and I gotta get away from it. And then it becomes authentic, because you're actually doing it. And then there's a million ways that you could actually do that in a more, contained way.
Exactly. That's great. Yeah.
What? We'll talk later. Yeah, we'll have a drink later. I'll fix you up.
Right. So really what we have been looking at is how the thought develops within a speech, how the thought, and it grows and grows and grows and comes to some conclusion. And the texture of the language, basically, in that, isn't it? In both those speeches, the texture of the language is very different. The lengths of vowels, lengths of consonants. We hear how the whole speech is given its dynamic by that word, if. It is as though it is all worked out in the moment of speaking it, how the thoughts are sparked off. They jump-start us to another part of his world. Notice how the images get more elaborate and confused as he goes on, and we begin to doubt that he will go through with the action. And now to a very different movement of language. It is from Hamlet, and at the heart of the play. Ophelia has been devastated by her encounter with Hamlet, who has behaved like a madman. He has reviled her with his disgust, not only of herself, but of the world. She believes him to be mad. Just listen to the rhythm of this, and to the lengths in the vowels, and how that gives the movement of the lines, and what this tells us of her state of mind.
Oh, what a noble mind is here o'erthrown. The courtiers, soldiers, scholars, eye, tongue, sword, the expectancy and rose of the fair state, the glass of fashion and the mould of form, the observed of all observers, quite down. And I, of ladies most deject and wretched, that sucked the honey of his music vows, now see that noble and most sovereign reason, like sweet bells jangled, out of tune and harsh, that unmatched form and feature of blown youth, blasted with ecstasy. Oh, woe is me, to have seen what I have seen, see what I see.
I want you to go over to a corner and crouch. He is going to come round after you. He is Hamlet in your mind. And so
you want me to move?
And so when he gets near you, you have to run somewhere else. Stop speaking and run somewhere else, and then say the next bit. It's like you're running away from him.
Okay. Oh, what a noble mind is here, O throne. The courtiers, soldiers, scholars, eye, tongue, sword. The expectancy and rose of the fair state. The glass of fashion and the mould of form. The observed of all the... The observed of all observers. Quite down. And I of ladies most deject and wretched, that sucked the honey of his music vows. Now see that noble and most sovereign reason. Like sweet bells jangled, out of time and harsh, that unmatched form and feature of blown youth, blasted with ecstasy. Oh, woe is me, to have seen what I have seen. See what I see. It's a kind of dawning on you.
It's like there's something there in your head, isn't there, that is haunting, as it were. What did make you feel?
Scared. It's like the words don't come out in their natural set form.
Yes.
It breaks things up for you.
Yes,
It's
it becomes jagged in a way.
Yeah, there's another...
Yeah.
Because it is such a kind of... The form of the speech is so regular.
Somehow I couldn't even hear the words. It seemed like the other side, that all I heard was O and E. So that it was O, and then, like in Revelation, E. Like when you see something, it's like, oh, and then when it really dawns on you what it is, it's like, E, like.
A lot of the exercises we're doing, too, the people who do them feel paranoid or afraid or scared, or, that's been a common reaction. Maybe because, well, when you face your fears, really powerful things come out of that.
Yeah.
You use things, you resort to instinctively to things that you would, in like a panic situation.
And also I think it's that sometimes the thing about Shakespeare is that partly because of the language, sometimes it protects you from the emotion.
Very good.
Of the piece, where it simply becomes a kind of well-spoken thing. Because it's beautifully spoken, what you do is you concentrate on speaking it beautifully, and you forget that actually what he's talking about is stuff that is raw emotion, whether that raw emotion is happiness or sadness or fear or passion. And because of the beautiful language, and you concentrate on speaking it well and concentrate on the iambic, that sometimes one of the things that happens quite a lot is that you separate from whatever the emotion is, not necessarily that it's a full-on emotion, but the danger is that it separates you from it as well.
Yeah, but in the end, we've got to put the two things together, like we are trying to do. But it seems like we've got to do that as well. And now just come in the middle and speak it, just with the idea of defining your feelings, because that in the end is what words do, isn't it? It defines your feelings, defines what you're thinking and define. So find that definition of it, almost as if you're writing it.
Oh, what a noble mind is here, O throne. The courtiers, soldiers, scholars, eye, tongue, sword. The expectancy and rose of the fair state. the glass of fashion and the mould of form, the observed of all observers, quite down. And I, of ladies most deject and wretched, that sucked the honey of his music vows, now see that noble and most sovereign reason, like sweet bells jangled out of tune and harsh, that unmatched form and feature of blown youth, blasted with ecstasy. Oh, woe is me, to have seen what I have seen, see what I see.
Great, yes. It's language going through you, basically, isn't it? And yet defining it.
I was very struck by the line, the glass of fashion and the mould of form. Just thinking about the shape of the whole speech and how regular it is, and yet it indicates this terrible fear and turmoil.
Yes.
Extraordinary.
So she's actually, yes.
It is a very bizarre thing to say, really, to all those things. She sort of lists all his accomplishments.
That is what the court would expect, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see, I mean, it's very much because, in fact, they have heard all this, haven't they? Polonius has been hiding and he hears all this. Don't worry about telling us, we heard it all. It's horrendous, that, isn't it?
Mm. She said quite down this time. It was like a bell.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant, yes.
Bump, bump, boom. It sounded like a bell to me. And then when you said sweet bells jangled out of time, I thought, yeah, it is.
Oh, fabulous. That's great, yes.
It's really kind of delicate, though, isn't it? It's kind of like winter time. It's like crystal. You know, it's like just like, you know, snowflakes almost. They're just so kind of easily crushed. And images, like Paul was saying, the glass of you know, was it the glass of glass things?
Yes.
Things that are quite beautiful to look at, but can be crushed, and really easily.
Yes, and splinter.
Yeah. It's really
And the blown youth as well. It's like it seems like a kind of, like a flower that's opened out and is about to go. You know, it's like the petals are going to fall off.
Yes. Now to Measure for Measure. In this speech, Isabella is working out a problem of conscience. Her brother Claudio has been condemned to die for having had unlawful intercourse with Juliet, who is pregnant by him. It is against the law. But Duke Angelo, who has enforced the law, lusts after Isabella and makes a bargain with her. If she will sleep with him, he will set her brother free. What irony. Her dilemma is that she must choose between her chastity and her brother's life. One or other has to be sacrificed.
O perilous miles, bearing in one and the self-same tongue, either condemnation or reproof, bidding all make courtesy to their will, hooking both right and wrong to the appetite, to follow as it rolls. As my brother, though he have fallen by prompture of blood, yet hath he in him such a mind of honor, that hath he 20 heads to tempt down on 20 bloody locks, he'd yield them up, before his sister should her body stoop to such a horrid pollution. Then Isabel lives chaste, and brother die. More than our brother is our chastity. I'll tell him yet of Angelo's request, and fit his mind to death for his soul's rest.
Yeah, anything about that?
It's very hard to enter into that possibility of that. I mean, someone would die for chastity. It's so difficult for us to even deal with the thinking in this. And that word request of something so awful. So that sets up a world which we have to, as said, embrace. Otherwise, you can't begin to do the play.
It's about governing as well. The governing power. This government is corrupt. Her government, God, is incorrupt in the absolute sense. She will not corrupt herself the way he has corrupted himself in his office. She won't do it. She will die for what she believes, which is true of anyone who truly believes in anything. They will die for their belief, whether it be war or anything. The pain of it is it's your brother. And now her faith is being tested in this, what she believes.
It all relates to the society that you live in.
And when the head is corrupt, the body suffers. The body of politics suffers.
Exactly.
And that's why it's so dangerous.
So everything has to be in Shakespeare, has to be measured against the society that is ruling.
And think about today, where the church has been corrupted with evangelists and money grubbing. They've corrupted the thing that God had set out for it to be. So it applies today in a very interesting way.
But these are the protestations that men in this time would have made. They'd be willing to die for family honor. And her mistake, such as it is, if there is one in the play, is that she takes at face value the principles of the society in which she lives. And that's what her innocence or naivety, as we might see it, tests. But we could set it like in this time, it would be The Godfather, or it would be Islam. You know, there are people do all over the world live by very strong principles, senses of honor.
Doesn't she say somewhere in the play that if she does this thing, she condemns him also? So it's not as if, I think, in her mind, if I do this thing and save him, he is saved. Instead, she says he also loses. In spirit, he is dead. So it's not as simple as
more than our brother. It's our chastity.
Exactly.
Our chastity. My brother and my chastity. And in that world, it's the man who threatens her purity. Therefore, it is the man who saves her purity. That as a woman, she has no action. It has to be her brother.
We have got to look at where the form helps all that. And I wondered if you two would mind sitting in the middle, back to back, leaning on each other, and doing the argument through, because I keep the conversation she's having with herself. And you start, Latanya.
To whom should I complain?
Did I tell this, who would believe me?
Oh, perilous mouths that bear in them one and the self-same tongue, either of condemnation or of proof.
Each actor is reading one whole sentence, either to a full stop or question mark, and by doing this, we will hear how Isabella is questioning both herself and her predicament. In other words, how she is thinking it through.
Had he 20 heads to tender down on 20 bloody blocks, he'd yield them up before his sister should her body stoop to such horrid pollution.
Then Isabel live chaste and brother die.
More than our brother is our chastity.
I'll tell him yet of Angelo's request, and fit his mind to death for his soul's rest.
It seems like they have a short thought, or at least the first questions, and then it just rolls into something, and then it stops, and then there's another one, I'll to my brother, and then that rolls even further.
And then it goes a bit wild, doesn't it? At 20.
When she's described the awfulness of the corruption, and these horrible images of hooking things up and dragging them, and it's a very savage image that she paints there, and then she goes immediately to the brother as the source of hope, security, sense, goodness.
That half line, I'll to my brother, is absolutely firm, isn't it?
Yes.
There's no other,
And that's the end
no
of the
other
line.
course possible.
There's no family, obviously. There's no mother. There's no father in the play. It's sort of odd that you don't ever see their parents. They're not there. So they're completely alone. They're left on their own devices.
I really noticed the line where she says, she's sort of putting it all on her brother, saying how wonderful and noble. And then she says, though he hath fallen by prompture of the blood, he's done exactly the same thing.
Yes. Quite ironic, isn't it?
And like, yeah, he's sort of, but yeah, still he's honourable and still he can die for my chastity, you know, it's like a complete hypocrisy.
It's not hypocrisy. She's married. She's a married woman to God.
Not yet.
But she's
But
taken
she's
the
a
road
novice.
to be there. Her commitment is still there. You're right. I think the wavering is right because it's human flesh talking. There's a premise here that we're so hip.
Yeah.
We don't think about it anymore. But it's still, there's a principle that still exists, whether we like it or we don't.
Yeah, but when she speaks, although she's insisting on
Yes.
the principle, the way she speaks kind of gives a lie to it because it's more complicated than she will admit to herself somehow.
This part becomes doctrine. Part of it is doctrine versus part of what she actually feels. That's all I'm saying.
True.
Flesh and keep that in mind and just run over there and do it.
Over here.
Move any way you like for each new thought.
To whom should I complain? Did I tell this, who would believe me? Oh, perilous mouths that bear in them one and the self-same tongue, either of condemnation or approof, bidding the law make curtsy to their will, hooking both right and wrong to the appetite to follow as it draws. I'll to my brother, though he hath fallen by prompture of the blood.
This exercise helps us to pinpoint how each thought opens out a question, and that question leads us to the next thought. Her mind is continually provoking the next thought, and in the end it leads her to this conclusion. More than our brother is our chastity.
Isabel lived chaste, and brother died. More than our brother is our chastity.
Yes. And that argument was so clear, wasn't it? Did you feel that?
Yeah.
You get a real sense from the language of total
Yes.
moral absolutes.
Yes.
Although
Brilliant.
it's very complex in her head,
Yes.
she is dealing with a moral absolute somehow.
Yes.
And she's. I heard this time so clearly was, I mean, unless I'm hearing it wrong, but I liked it the wrong way I was hearing it. Oh, perilous mouths that bear in them. That whole thing this time to me refers to whom should I complain? There's no one that will hold the ambivalence of this. That there is. It's easy for them. They'll just pick a right or wrong and say it's simple. When the truth is, I'm caught in this ambivalence. I'm stuck between these two things that are both so powerful.
Yes. Can we have Lindsay now? Can we all stand up and just speak it in the middle again? What I'd like you now to do is actually just start over there in a minute, and I want you to say a phrase. I want you to go up to somebody and say part of it directly to them. Okay? So you go over there. And I want you to be walking around the room so she doesn't quite know where to go. When she comes up to you, turn away. Yes. Right. So they're going to be walking all around the room and just really hook onto somebody. Right.
To whom should I complain? Did I tell this, who would believe me? Oh, perilous mouths that bear in them one and the self-same tongue, either of condemnation or approof, bidding the law make curtsy to their will, hooking both right and wrong to the appetite to follow as it draws. Oh, to my brother, though he hath fallen by prompture of the blood, yet hath he in him such a mind of honor that had he 20 heads to tender down on 20 bloody blocks, he'd yield them up before his sister would her body stoop to such abhorred pollution. Then Isabel lived chaste, and brother die. More than our brother is our chastity. A desperate need to convey
I mean, to justify a desperate need. To
I-
make someone listen.
The thing I felt is that you're almost immediately on your brother's side, not yours. That actually you're kind of, you feel for him.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's because of our relationship to God now, or our general kind of relationship to God, where she, just sleep with the guy. I mean, it's one night, for God's sake. A couple of minutes, maybe. You know, it's...
A quickie.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so I mean, that's the real, seems to be the real kind of
Yes,
difficulty of the thing.
That's the problem when you read it. You think, you must be kidding.
Yeah.
You're not going to let him die. But then when you speak it, you have no other choice but to commit totally to that. And then what happens between you and who's listening is the interesting bit.
The desperation of your argument is what led me to think, oh, she's wrong. She has to convince herself far too much for this to be right.
Yes.
Whereas, you know, there may be, let's say, and Brutus the same thing with the serpent's egg. You think, is there a clue in the way it's written how it should be played? I mean, would the argument be a better argument if he didn't want the desperation?
Yeah, the desperation is only there to release certain things about the argument, just so we're let into how people's minds tick and what makes them do something. That's the bottom line of it, isn't it? All these soliloquies have been an attempt to explore how the language informs our search for the character, the rhythms, the structures of thought, the imagery, the very choice of words and sounds. They all take us to the very center of the character and to the predicament of that character. In the next tape, tape 3, we will be looking at the differences between speaking prose and verse. How prose has very specific rhythms of its own, often more difficult to pin down. We will also be looking at some passages of dialogue to find the shared energy, shared cadence and music in a text with more than one character, and how actors can use this to give energy and suspense to a scene. And we will end by looking at a piece of modern text, a speech from Edward Bond's Lear. We will take a speech from the play and work on it using exercises which we have already done on the Shakespeare texts, and we will see that these exercises can open up modern text for the actor in very similar ways.